Well, hello. Hi, Sheila. Hi, Valerie. My name is Amy Johnson, and we are here for our December 11th, 11/11, which is Let's Talk About Living Our Values. And today we're talking about values and how to navigate the holidays to have joy and peace and connectedness all through a time that can be both fun and, a little bit chaotic at times as well. So we like talking about values, and we want to start by reminding each other and ourselves what values are and how we define them in this work. So values are they're single words or short phrases that connect us to our authentic selves. They are the bridge between our innermost self and the outside world. And by doing this, they become our inner compass to help us navigate where we want to go and how to get there and really understand and make decisions that are in alignment with what matters to us most. And in that regard, the holidays are a perfect time where we need that bridge, because we have whatever is going on for us internally and what matters to us. And then there's a lot happening out there. So it's a perfect time to rely on our values, because it gives us something that's a consistent tool and a consistent framework to make sure that we're, caring for ourselves and speaking our truth, no matter what we're doing or buying or shopping or out there interacting in the world. So that is a little bit how we talk about values. Sheila, do you have anything you want to add?
That's a beautiful description. And it is just about what you described before, in addition to living our values every day, your love, peace.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Which I think is a wonderful expression of what it is that we're trying to do. And I just find that every time that I go through this process and connect to my values and talk about them, I always learn something new, and it always anchors me a little bit more in them. And it's such a powerful way to live, because it just keeps me so clear and so focused and so just on top of the things that are really important in any moment, and especially during the holidays, because there is a lot going on, as Amy said, for all of us. So really tapping into that and connecting with it and being clear about that and is a great place to be. So I'm happy for this discussion today.
Yes, it's true. It's a really timely thing. And I thank you for even reminding me, because I have found in this work that living our values every day is a radical act of love. And it's also, I really like a good acronym. It's also an acronym. So I like LIVE is L, O is ours, V values, E every day. Live our values every day. And it's a reminder to take that with us, because when we live in alignment, we really are demonstrating what matters and making decisions that reflect the most important parts of ourselves, especially during the holiday. This particular time, this Let's Talk About Living Our Values, is something we created to have a conversation and create an open space to talk about values, because we have found that there isn't much conversation about them out in the world. If it is talked about, it's very general, and it's mostly geared towards organizations or businesses or companies, not about how individual values are accessed and used every day. And so we wanted to create an open space to start having those kinds of conversations, to ask questions, get clear about what your values are, what are the challenges, what are the successes, and how to access them every day and live. So with that, Valerie, do you want to share a little bit what brought you to come today, or what intrigued you about this besides us meeting a little bit ago?
Yes, I have such an open heart, so I will try to think before I say, because it's being recorded. But yeah, I mean, values are very important. I find that when you define your values, the external world has to catch up with your internal world. A lot of the time, it feels like the universe is catching up with your dreams. And I find something that I'm facing right now is my relationship with money and even going one step beyond the relationship, it's just being aligned to my values with a place of work, and what is that place of work and where do I belong right now, while supporting my creative dreams and endeavors in school. So, it's kind of like, how does that all connect, and how can we all connect with like the golden network of hearts with like divine feminine and new earth energies, as we all like support one another through this process of transformation and like a reset of, essentially the world and our global community.
Beautifully stated. I really like that. I resonate with what you're saying. It is so much about connecting internally, and you're right about, I like that, the world has to catch up. What's happening in here, this resonance and this core sense of peace and connection to the deeper meaning of your life and how you want to express, it's such a powerful piece for me about how I choose to use values. And I always anchor in them no matter what is happening. So it's like whatever the circumstances are, whatever's going on, if I'm clear about how I'm trying to be in the world, how I want to show up in the world, what I want to embody, it makes it so much easier to have the meaningful conversations, to connect in ways, to do things in service of my own growth and hopefully the transformation of everybody, as we uplift. It's a beautiful expression.
And to add to that, Valerie, it's true, because we're really passionate and have those creative forces within us, and that it feels disconnected from the outside world, or it's not being expressed in a way that's really able to take care of ourselves, because there are these multiple levels at which we need to be cared for. Then what I have found, and why I really appreciate this work, is it's somewhat of a different way of looking at values, because we talk about a set of 5 to 7. And so oftentimes, even for myself, I'll rely too heavily on 1 or 2. And then the other 5 are not getting lived as much. So I think I'm living in alignment with my values, but I'm actually out of balance. And so it's not harmonizing in as well as I could be. So one example of that is my value of flourish, which means blooming and blossoming and being out in the world and expansiveness and breath and growth and beauty. And that value tended to be a little bit more hidden. Even though I appreciate all those things, I wasn't necessarily living it. And when I realized in my work that being visible and being seen, as uncomfortable as it made me feel, is an aspect of flourishing. And so because it was be blossoming out there, even if that means showing up on a social media platform, which I don't fully agree with all the time in terms of their values, but doing it mindfully and intentionally. So it was important for me to recognize that. So when I do any kind of marketing or putting myself out there, I attach it to flourish, and it has a different energy to it. It doesn't become a should. It comes from that internal place that helps me do things that I'm uncomfortable with, or that aren't really that natural to me per se. And that's how those values, otherwise I could be in integrity, which I'm not going to not be in integrity, but I'll be so stuck in integrity, which I read was when you get stuck, it's like an extreme version of stability, where I'm so hanging on tight. I think it was Esther Perel said, stuckness is an extreme state of stability, because most systems go from like stability to flexibility, but too much flexibility can be chaotic and too much stability can be stuck. So it's kind of like not getting in either of those places. So when I'm just focused on one thing, like doing the right thing no matter what, I lose sight of what that might really be, because I'm totally narrow in my mindset. That's just an example for me. It may not resonate exactly for you, but by having the 5 to 7, I can look at, oh, my value of flourish. I'm not really living that because I'm never going to post on Facebook because I don't like some of their policies. Now, I can also be mindful of how much I do and what I do and where I go. And I've also focused on some of the amazing things and connections I've made with old friends through that platform. And how can I help participate in making that platform better rather than a rigid rejection of that. And that's just a personal thing I've walked through. Sheila knows. You want to say something? Oh, no, she has to go. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's one way the values have been helpful for me to bridge that gap from the inside to the outside.
Yes, 100%. Totally. That all expanded me in a way of the simplicity of a value being a word. And then the 360 outlook of those words and how they're all forming the, the pie together to make the whole of you. And yeah, I mean, and also I guess I have a question of like, how do you face rejection, or how do you balance between values and knowing that you're creating the new, like this creatrix energy and initiatrix energy of others, where you're creating the new and you're not looking, that's all coming from within, but you're not looking on the outside, but you have to look on the outside in order to, fit into some kind of society and resonate with people so that they can hear you and hear your message, and which ultimately leads to your foundation and compensation. And that's the give and take and receiving to give, like 828 energy of sharing your voice, sharing your gifts with the world. Do you know what I mean? Does that all make sense somehow?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say the values are that bridge is how I've looked at it, because that's why we need a bridge. And one of the things Sheila knows as well is that we've often talked about is, and this is a real life example, I think, of what you're saying, is the word values doesn't really resonate with a lot of people. So using it in any kind of messaging or putting it out there is sometimes not as effective as using other words per se. And for myself, I'm actually diving deeper into using it because I want to break that barrier, and it may mean take a little bit longer to get there, but part of my mission is to live our values every day, and that means bringing the word into the consciousness. And so it's taking longer to get it out there. And the point is that it's done intentionally and consciously, but not at the expense of my well-being or my children's well-being, because I have children I'm responsible for. So, and supporting them. So my value of sustainability, of being able to have a sustainable financial life for my family and myself, is also a value that I don't want to ignore. So did that answer what you were saying? Yeah. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Amy.
See you.
Good to see you too.
This is Valerie on here too.
Oh, hi.
And Valerie, you wrote resilience in the chat. What were you thinking about with that?
It just sounded like you were really like driving home the resilience that you have, like when a word isn't being coined in the outside world, or like paid attention to that much. You're like, no, I'm gonna make it stick. And that's why, that's part of like the really like getting people to understand and allow it to be in their orbit, because
Right.
otherwise it's easy.
Right. So it's how do you move the needle, but not be so alienating that that people don't understand. So it's kind of a dance rather than forcing it. Sometimes I go one way and sometimes I go another, but I'm inching more towards talking about it. because the ultimate aim for me is connection. When I think about the holidays, when I think about values, one of my values is connection. So how do I connect with people, with my message? Because I've learned also too, I used to work in entertainment, which is about connecting with an audience. I could sit and make creative movies all the time in my own home, but it's a different experience when you're creating something for an audience or for other people. So it's important to respond to what your audience wants, as well as not only cater to that. You still have how do you hold your integrity? It's the kind of the dialectic, the yes and. It's that the conflict between two opposing parts, which is actually my value of creativity, which is how do you hold two completely opposing things, which is like hold on to your creativity, but also make a movie that attaches to the audience. That's just kind of an example. I'm not really making movies right now, but something I thought about in the past. But it always resonated with me because I worked in art house films. And when you had a director, but I don't care what the audience thinks. But then why make a movie? Just make it for yourself. And so it's that kind of dance a little bit. Sheila, you're nodding.
Oh, yeah, yes, and I mean, I agree with all that. And I think that, I mean, people do different things for different reasons. So there's the creative expression because you have something that you want to say. And so you can say it in a way that feels authentic and real for you, that's making a statement, right? Whatever the statement might be. And whoever lands with that statement, I mean, that part is less around your ability to control, because there were people who will gravitate and vibrationally draw to your message, and you will have that connection with them. And there will be people for whom that doesn't happen. And for me, it's about being okay with both of those, because it's, you can't be everything to everybody. It's still your space and your values, right? The very person that you are might be offensive to somebody just because their values are so different from yours. But that doesn't mean that there's anything that needs to be sacrificed in terms of how you go about expressing and living your life. It's just recognizing that, saving the world is about really embodying and bringing something new consistently, bringing yourself fully into this moment, and being that embodiment of something that people can then hold on to and see as an expression of like, oh, this is a different way to be, and I want to be that way too, or I connect with this person. So that's kind of how I view that.
Yeah, I agree with that too in that regard. So, and I think what I was also wanting to say is what medium you're working in too. So if you're choosing, what I meant by that too is like if you're choosing film as an essence and you're thinking it, but now that was 20 years ago. Film often happens people alone, and you're not in an audience where you're having a collective experience together. People are watching more movies by themselves streamed in their living rooms. So it's a different kind of experience. So so bringing that back to values, right? It's the bridge between our inner selves and the outside world, and how that gets expressed, and what that outside world we're working in is different, whether that's a family experience during the holidays, baking cookies, sitting around a fire, taking a hike, a walk together, or if it's being in a work situation, which we're talking about, like how we're going to demonstrate what our calling is, what our work is to the world, what's our message to that, and then navigating it as best we can. Yeah. How are you today, Cynthia?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Just moving from meeting to meeting.
Yes, I'm glad you were able to come in and say hi.
Yes, I wouldn't miss it. Yes, so I'm excited about moving into the new year and thinking about all my values that once I choose, set on a certain amount of values that I want to focus on, just really staying true to those values, almost like a it'll be a 365-day diet of staying true to your values. So I could build up the muscle to focus on my values. Because sometimes your values kind of slip and slide, or maybe you don't uphold your values. So I think I'm going to look at it like a challenge, to a 365-day challenge. So when I sit down at the end of the year and write down the values that I want to focus on and where I'm going, I will challenge myself, the 365-day challenge.
That's inspiring. I love that.
I do too. I love that too.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild ride when you start to really put it in the front of your consciousness, because it makes you, I have found such shifts in the smallest things that then have a ripple effect in all areas of my life. So doing it every day like that, live our values every day. Love that's that demonstration. And having others on the path to do that is fun too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think once you name it and claim it, that's when you will face challenges right in front of you to stay true to what you said you want to do. You will have many challenges ahead. So I'm going to name it and claim it and glow through it and grow through it.
It's so true, because we talk about values here are not about being perfect, and there's not about shoulds, and it's not about black and white. It's really about nuance and self-expression and finding our way through, because values can be co-opted to be used as judgment and finger pointing, and that's not what we talk about when we talk about values. And it's important, because on that path, it is a little bit of, is this in alignment or not? I don't know. And can that still be okay? And it is okay. All of it's okay, because it's more about the daily interaction with it.
Yeah, I like the part about the using the muscle, building the muscle. It's really growth opportunities. I mean, I think to me, just the whole point of being here is around just growing and continuing to unfold and flourish, and to just be more and more of who you truly are, to get better at being you and showing up in the world. And so it's not perfect. I mean, there are moments when it's like, oh, wow, okay, I really need to like shore up this value, because it's not, I'm not expressing, I'm reacting, and I'm not responding in a way that honors this value, that brings it forth into this experience that I'm having in front of me right here and right now. So when I have moments of whatever it might be, frustration, or when I judgment, things come up and I'm evaluating what's happening around me, my value of presence helps me to really realign with that, because there's like a certain amount of acceptance. It's like, okay, you don't get to dictate how this moment is going to unfold. It's happening. So how are you going to manage it? How are you going to deal with it? What are you going to bring to it? How are you going to be your best self in this moment, no matter what it is? And that's a constant challenge. Yeah, because there are situations that I find that I get in with people, and I have, certain people, like loved ones, one sister in particular, who knows how to press my buttons sometimes. And so there's spots that I could definitely continue, and I do continue to like benefit and then reflect on, okay, how was that experience? And gosh, how could I do that differently, because I didn't like the way that felt, or I want to just be a better person when this happens, or I want to get to the point where this doesn't impact me the way that it does, so it's like, it's always my work to do. It's not about changing the person. It's about, okay, I've got some more work to do here, because it's like, I'm seeing something showing up right here. It's not exactly the way I wanted to be. And I need to do better around making space for that. Like you talked about earlier, Valerie, having that open heart, that open heart is so important. I want to keep my heart open want to close that off to any experience, or to have like tension be the thing that blocks me from flourishing. So it's a constant. So I love conceptually the whole 365-day challenge. I think it's fabulous. It's a different way of looking at it, because it's like a daily commitment, and that's really great. So
Mhm.
I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah, we want to support you on that too.
Yes.
And take the challenge with you.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I
I think that's a great idea.
Definitely. It's really
It's
fabulous.
every day.
It
Mhm.
is.
Yeah. And because do you feel like I know you did the workshop with us the first time fully, do you feel like you have a clear set 5 to 7 core values? I don't want to put you on the spot. I just am curious if that feels like if it's in focus to you, or do you want more support on what those 5 to 7 are?
I think I have somewhat of a clear focus, maybe not 7, maybe around 4 values. But during the pandemic, since I've been living and caregiving with my mother, yeah, it's been challenging because my buttons, like Sheila's, have been pushed, and I don't want to, as I look back on it, it hasn't been pushed. It's just that I'm not sitting in my space of values, because what someone says, it's my interpretation that takes me in a different direction. But when I sit on my values of love and integrity, I'm not going to respond. I have to figure out, we put the meaning to everything. Every day, anything that someone says, good or bad, that runs through our brains, we as an individual give the meaning to it. But when I'm focused on my values, it doesn't trigger me, because my values give me the meaning to whatever goes on in my life. But when I don't have values, yes, I give a different meaning, and it might be some old meaning of hurt or whatever. But when I approach it in my values, no, I'm much calm and more peaceful. And I might let some things just go by me. So
Right.
I appreciate you helping me to focus on my values.
That's so beautifully stated,
So beautiful.
Cynthia. Really, because that's the crux of it. That's the core of it. It really is, because the values are so grounding. They're so grounding. They just return you to you, right? They return you back to what's most important.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're living from what's most important, then you're operating from that as well, right? So the things that might be, and you're right, old tapes, old stories, they surface, and here they are getting priority, and say, wait a minute, no, I can do better than that. I have more control over this situation and how I think about it and how I interpret it than I'm giving myself credit for it. It's up to me to, in the context of my values, like one of my values is lead with compassion. So I constantly have that's constantly coming forward, because if I'm not leading with compassion and I find myself in judgment, then I need to back up and think, okay. I was just listening to Brene Brown yesterday. There was just this one workshop that she did where she just talked about just how challenging it is to when you're in a judgment place, right, and not coming from a place of compassion. And God, it's just so clear to me that when I am in judgment, I know that I'm not in alignment. Clearly not in alignment. Whatever's happening, I'm not in alignment, because I'm expecting things to be a certain way. And when I release that, because it's my work to do, right? It's not anybody else's work to do. It's mine to do. It's mine to find a way in this moment to see the experience differently, what you're talking about, Cynthia, and like to say, oh, okay, I'm going to give this more grace. I'm gonna trust that this person is doing the best that they can. I'm gonna have a different experience of how I'm viewing this and what this person has said or is doing in this moment. And it just like makes all the difference in the world. It just really does.
Mhm.
Right. That's
Mhm.
so perfectly said, Sheila.
Yeah. You know what actually helped me as well, because if I would respond in a certain way, it took me so long to go to sleep because I was tossing and turning because of what I said would eat me up. And you can kind of get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then I have to, ask God for forgiveness. And I think how many times you gonna go through that and take yourself through that. So one of my values is to have a healthy mind, body, and spirit. But I could say that, but then live a lie of responding to something that probably wasn't anything. But when you bring in that movie that you run through your head, it'll cause you to respond a certain way. But if you want to live in the truth of your values, because you want to have a healthy mind, body, and spirit, you will just have the grace and compassion to respond and think about what the other person's needs are. I didn't even know that I grew up, as much as I'm giving, I look back and I grew up as the most selfish person ever towards my family. As much as I gave to them, oh man, I mean, gave time, money, and everything else. There's this huge part when I replayed it and never replayed it until late in my life, that you were entirely selfish. And if you hadn't been so selfish, you would have actually had a different outcome in your own life. So the values that I choose, I don't want to live a lie on those values.
Yeah.
I just want to give you my last example. I saw a guy who was riding a bike, and I was parked and he wanted to put air in his tire, but the gas station attendant hadn't turned on the air yet, and I could see he was vacillating. I rolled down my window and I said, I will watch your bike while you go and tell him to turn on the air. And then he came back and I got out and I said to him, you don't have a helmet on. No, I didn't say that first. Oh yeah, I said, you're not wearing a helmet. And he said, yeah, I know. I said, do you have a family? He said, yeah, I have a wife and a son. I said, do you love your son? And do you love your family? He said, yes. I said, I don't think you're telling the truth. Because if you were telling the truth that you loved your wife and your son, you would have a helmet on. Because if you get in any kind of accident, you can end up being a vegetable or crippling your family financially. So you can't tell me that you love your family. He said, yeah. He said, I'm going to go get a helmet. He said, I never thought of it like that. I said, do you have the money to get a helmet? Because I was prepared to give him money. And he said, yes. And he said, can I give you a hug? So that's the same thing with your values. Let's tell ourselves the truth.
That is such a bold and beautiful way to interact with a complete stranger. I love it because it comes from such a beautiful place of authenticity and just caring, right? So so immediately for me, because I know other people, I've known people like you who can say things that are really hard things to say to like people, and they're like, oh my God, wow, she just said that. But it's because it's coming from a loving place. right? It's because of your value of love and your value of connection and your value of caring that people can feel the energy of that and receive it that way, instead of like a criticism or like, you should be doing this, or an admonishment or whatever else. It came across really differently, and it struck him in a way that he hadn't really thought of, and to challenge somebody to say, I don't think you really love your family, because then it's like, wow, that's great. I mean, that's great. It's really powerful, because that's such a beautiful example of embodying your values and being able to go out into the world and make a small difference in somebody's life that ripples, right? That their family may never be able to thank you, and may never even know that your gesture, your willingness to come forward, saved them,
Right.
kept them together.
Oh yeah.
You never know, but that's just so powerful, Cynthia. I love it. Good on you. Good on you.
But it's the truth. You can't. You can't say one thing and do the other. It's just, and I had a bicycle accident out of the blue, no cars around, out of the blue, ended up in an ambulance, concussion, the whole thing, just out of the blue. I was very, very blessed because I had my helmet. There was parts of the street implanted in my helmet. So I'm coming from a place that I know exactly what I am talking about. And it's not good. So when I drove away and saw him riding, he was riding on the sidewalk after that. He wouldn't get in the street. That was funny.
Love it. I love it.
Right. Yeah. And so speaking your truth from that loving place is powerful to do, and from your own experience and a demonstration of that. And it's situational. Like, we can't do that all the time in all situations. You must imbibe the energy of him and how that worked, because in certain situations it can be really difficult. But learning how to speak your truth. And I think what you're talking about is examining how this shows up in our life all the time. And when I talk about like how we make decisions all day, micro decisions and macro decisions all day long, and they're often done habitually, automatically, unconsciously, impulsively. And then the values help bring the unconscious conscious, so that we're doing it more intentionally. So like, oh, I don't need a helmet becomes a more conscious decision, because I value sustaining my life. I value sustainability. I value connection to my family and love. I value health and well-being of mind, body, and spirit, like you were saying. So it connects to something more than oh, I don't need one, because we're doing it impulsively, or we're rushed, or whatever is going on. So it really connects back to it. I mean, that's how I have found to live it daily, to live my values daily. So Valerie, do you have any questions? Because Cynthia's been on these before, and I know this is newer to you, this way of thinking. Is there any questions that you have?
Yeah, I had two buckets. One was I was reflecting and, just going through the process, like I felt, or something that's come up for me often was that if I practice my values, or the more I embodied my values, the more fulfilled I may have been, but the more friends or like social circles or everything, and even to the point of years later, work dissipated, and I didn't resonate with the people around me anymore, or they didn't resonate with me, or I was the black sheep, because I cared about sustainability or climate, because I didn't really care about it so much anymore, and I cared more about my like mental well-being. And before I knew it, like I didn't have whoever was in my world on the outside anymore. So it was, it's interesting because I wrote like your values, and then it was like this feeling of like separation from the collective. And then you're like going to this womb state, and then you're like rejoining the collective, like embracing your values. And then different people are surrounding you, but I'm still at the point where I'm really not satisfied with, where I live, or not. I feel like I'm not around my people as much as I'd like to be, even if it's like a passerby in yoga. Like it's not enough, like to just have people be acquaintances. Like you need like deep connections.
Yeah.
And then that brought me to the second bucket of like the values of the collective, and like what are, like we all have our individual values, of course, and then there's this process of defining it, recognizing it, and then practicing it like the 365 days a year. But what are the collective values? And that's going from what you said, like the micro and macro decisions, and like can we get to the place where, you know, at the UN, they start by listing, you know, but you know what I mean? Like, they might do that. And I know you were saying that companies tend to do that, but at an individual level, can we like reapproach the collective into this more unifying goal that we have, like community between all of us? And what are those values that we share as a planet? Because when I hear about things like XYZ satellite and people going out in space, and it's like, who gives someone, like, I don't want someone to colonize the moon. Like the moon is our mother, our grandmother, like, you know what I mean? Like who gives that human the right to make that decision for everyone else? So there's things like that that I get into really, you know, contrast conversations with certain family members, certain pockets, and I'm just like embracing my open head center as like letting the information come and go and not getting attached to things and not being super opinionated, and you know, not having to express my opinion, knowing your audience sometimes. But yeah, there was like that social bucket to like the community and like the collective values to, yeah, you know, like really this like idea of unity.
Yeah, I mean, those are all really important criteria to think about in this work. Like they're none of it all, and big, each of them are their own big conversation. I think what you're saying in terms of the collective, I don't know that there's one set of values per se that we see out there. And part of it is doing our own work and keeping the focus on ourselves so that our incremental shifts can help move the needle in some way. And that and for me, bringing the unconscious conscious in the decision to wear a helmet or not is a huge shift. And that more of us that continue to talk about this will make each of us make better decisions and speak up more, and in our own way contribute. Because if we can, it can get super frustrating to focus the other way. And so living our values every day is a radical act of love, is something to consider about shifting that. We can't really control what happens out there. And I personally don't believe in ignoring it. I think what you said, like notice it, be discerning about it, and move, and then don't focus on it, continue to focus on ourselves and putting our own values, living our own values to be in alignment so that we can take care of our own personal responsibility, integrity, and speaking up if we need to, if something isn't right, not ignoring that either, signing petitions, speaking up, protesting. I think all of that is super important.
Yeah.
In terms of shifting the collective, because there isn't just one, and there's multiple. These things are complex. The one thing we can all do is just be more aware, and then incrementally, little by little, make better decisions to shift and take responsibility for our own actions, which is what 365 days of living your values is. Living in integrity, really.
Have you found, kind of like what I was saying before with like going backwards to, well, also I like all of that, and I think it is really complex, but it's also really interesting. Like you don't have to necessarily have the same values of everyone in the room. Like you don't even have to have agree upon all the same values. But from what you said, it basically sounds like the more that the individual takes that radical responsibility for their values, that is enough.
I believe so. I mean, it's
I mean, there's no right or wrong answer.
right. Yeah. I mean, we're
But-
less likely to be manipulated, is my hope, right? If we do the work and are clear about our values and separate out, because it can be an advertising, a marketing situation, communication, fake news, whatever you want to put that bucket in, can send us onto a whole thing. The more we're focused on our inner compass, the less we're going to be reactive to that. I've certainly been manipulated before, and kind of, but knowing it happens when I tend to get out of myself and don't focus on my core values and my inner, and look towards my inner toolbox that way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer that to what you mean? And yeah, and sometimes, right, like it does mean shifting situations, like community, like people don't really believe in the same values, but maybe you may not believe in this one value, but when you have the 5 to 7, there may be others that you do. And so having that consciousness too.
And like respecting one another's values, like especially with, I'm not even going to say it, but the whole thing with the divide now, it's just like, can you just respect their values, and can you just take the third door of not being so attached and just staying in your lane kind of thing. Like you don't have to always look left and right, because then you're so clouded, you lose your own sense of groundedness over your decisions and over your values and how you like to be. And I get uncomfortable even when people ask me, personal questions. I'm just like, I'll answer it, and then afterwards I'm like, why did I have to answer that? Like I wish I kept that to myself, or because I don't go in a room asking someone a personal question. So there's like these interesting human experience moments where you're just like, okay, so I guess that means that I'm like this, so that's why I feel funny after, of like overexposing.
Right, vulnerability. It's
Yeah.
vulnerable. Yeah.
Right, particularly if you're concerned that somebody's going to use that in a way that is not how you intended it to be used.
Right. Or to like now group us together, but I don't want to be grouped with you. I'm a sovereign being, and I'm, just showing up to yoga.
Like, right. Yeah, that's one of my mantras. Don't put me in a box. You put me in a box.
Right.
I've taken myself out of so many boxes. I'm not going to allow you to put me into one.
Yeah,
because it's a lot more complex than that. Yeah, exactly.
We're in little boxes, but we're out of the box.
Exactly.
We're also
let's talk about our values.
Right. I don't mind this box for this moment, but it's like, yes, don't put me in a box. I mean, the thing is, the thing that I just want to say too, Valerie, is that, the thing that I come to know is that everybody has values. Everybody has values, and they believe those values are really important. Like even in the example that you gave of the space exploration, somebody might really value advancement, and they might value risk-taking, they might value exploration, they might value these things really to the point where they think that what they're doing, really honors those values. I mean, there's so many values out there, right? So it's like, the only way that I'm able to stay sane and just be someone who can contribute on a regular basis is to really, like you talk about, stay in your lane. And it's around my zone of influence. I really like to anchor in my zone of influence. Now, if that's within groups, if that's with my family, if that's with individuals, if it's in the work that I do, however it is, how can I influence, and how can I be that person or be that force that advocates for certain things that I think are really important, to me. I think a lot of people are doing that same thing. And if I get caught up in what's happening out there and all the different ways in which people are expressing, I lose my power, because now I'm reacting. I'm worried. I get into fear. I get into a lot of places that just don't serve me. So I can't be my radiant self when I am focused on what a lot of other people are doing. Now I try to, the whole piece around the collective, there's like so many collectives that you can be a part of where you feel that loving support and you feel that you are all moving in a similar direction, and you can look at your values and how they interweave and intersect. And that's such a beautiful thing, because that also creates that sense of, community, and that sense of whatever it is, like we're making a shift together, right? But all the other stuff that's happening out there's lots of it, right? It's hard for me to attune to that and still be in my space and still make a contribution.
Yeah, I'm getting the visual of like when you picture geese either on the side of a lake or flying. It's always one that goes first, and then the other goes into the lake, and then the other, and then all of a sudden they form this beautiful line going across the lake. Or if they're flying, especially on the coast of Florida, there was these crazy, I forget what you call those birds, but they're giant and they're like only in Florida, I've seen. And there's one, and then there's two, and then there's three, and then all of a sudden this whole flock is going by, but there's only, there's one leader, and then a couple minutes go by and it's a different flock where there's one leading, but they're behind it, this one, but they're also ahead of this one. And it's this like beautiful metaphor of just, I don't even think I have to say it, but you know what I mean? Like, you rise first, you rise for she, and all divine timing and universal intelligence. Like there's, the rose doesn't rush to bloom. It's kind of like this idea of like, there's always going to be those collectives ahead. There's always going to be the collectives behind. There's always going to be one leader. But if you can picture, if you define your values and you live them, you can be that first goose. Or they're not geese though. They're like large birds they're like cranes.
Are they egrets? No, not egrets. There's something else, huh? Or just gorgeous birds.
Pelicans. I think they might be pelican. I'm like,
I've never been to Florida.
Do pelicans exist?
Oh, pelicans too. We have them here on the West Coast.
Maybe it's a
They
pelican.
fly really close to the water.
Yeah, and they're so
dive in. Beautiful. They're just beautiful. Yes, they're stunning.
I never saw one in person until this year.
Oh, how exciting. Yes.
Yeah, they really stuck with me, obviously.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
I love
That's it.
looking to nature too, in that biomimicry way of like how to demonstrate how to live a framework and how to live our lives. Like that's a beautiful thing. So you giving us that image is such a gift to remember what this work is about and how we can make those shifts and fly together.
It's not a competition, but they're all flying north. And the way I look at it is like the vision, the North Star.
Right. And another level of that is when I think of you saying that, I think of biomimicry, which is part of my value of sustainability, how to look out into nature and get inspiration from nature and the natural world. Right. So that to me is my value of sustainability. So that's a demonstration of it.
And that's my value of reverence for life.
Reverence for life. Right.
Absolutely that. It's just, because it's yes, we're no different from that. And when we're in harmony with that and in flow with that, amazing things happen.
Right. And and then having this conversation, we end the call shortly and we go off our day and I certainly feel super inspired and fulfilled having that, knowing that I touched almost all of my values. I think I talked about all of them today in some form or fashion, not intentionally, necessarily saying I need to check a box, but like, oh, wow, this is how the conversation went today. And then we can go out in the world and have a different shift within ourselves. Because
live your values without saying it.
Right.
Because that's what you're doing. You just are your values and that embodiment that we were talking about before.
I do think it's important to name them. Like we don't have to, I thought it might be fun to have t-shirts at some point that are sustainably made, hopefully by Marcy, with our values on them. I think that would be really cool. And so I do think the naming of them is important. So it's not in a vague sense, but we don't have to be like, these are the right values to have in the world, it's just owning it and naming it, discovering them for ourselves, and then demonstrating it in how we live our life.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any final thoughts as we, Sheila? I mean, Cynthia, you go. And then
Okay. You know, I just love the example of the geese. It was just so fabulous, and who we are as human beings as well. I just think with our values, we can attract people and enroll them into values or our values by just being an example. If we live on our values, we can make a universal shift in this world. And if we're just the best soldier in the room, people will feel it. They will feel your values and who you are. Like the Pied Piper, remember going through the town, and they gathered people along the way. And they gathered a lot of people along the way. And those are the people who are enrolling in their values. And we could do that. We can attract whatever we want to attract by keeping our values close to our vest and within us and just living them.
Yes.
And if someone asks you a personal question, that's no problem. You can respond with a different answer, the answer that suits you and not them. And they will get the message. If someone asks you about, you eat meat? Because I don't eat meat. So I don't want to put anybody down who eats meat, because they want to pigeonhole me for being a non-meat eater. And so I will just talk about the values that I have experienced by not eating meat. And it shuts them down. Nobody's offended. And you might have recruited them in your values, educated them, or when they get in their quiet space, when everything, their health is failing and everything else, they'll reflect on what you said. And next thing you know, you will be the best example in the room, the best soldier in the room, and the Pied Piper.
I love it.
yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Cynthia. Sheila, any final
Oh
thoughts?
no, that's such a beautiful way to wrap up. What else is there to
Okay.
say? I think it's just been a very, as always, a very rich conversation and resonant. And I just love these because I just always learn something new, and I can always reflect on something. That's just a beautiful way to just deepen my own appreciation and understanding of the values that I have and how to live them every day. So thank you for showing up and being here and for participating. It's powerful.
Yes.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
And we're live. We do this every month. So if you want to come back on the 11th of every month at 11 a.m., it's the 11 a.m. PST Pacific time. I don't know, Valerie, if are you East Coast?
Florida.
Yeah, New York.
New York.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So we're,
Beautiful.
so it's 11 here.
I figured that out before.
You did because you showed up.
Terrific.
But it's wonderful to have you. We'd love to have you come back, and we, love talking about all this. So thank you for
It's
contributing.
really incredible.
Yes.
Great to meet you, Valerie.
Yes.
Yes, you too, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
goodness.
find something you love about your place, because you said you weren't happy about where you live. Find something you absolutely love.
Been living
So
at home
you can-
for like ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It is nice.
Yeah. And I like this 365-day challenge. So
Yeah.
I might take it with you.
Mhm. Love it.
Oh, yeah. And that's a good title for your next book, the 365-day values
Challenge.
You
I
can
know. I
have
like
that
it.
title, okay?
Okay. Thank you for that. Sounds great. All right. Bye,
Oh
everyone.
my goodness, bye.
Bye-bye. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Mwah.
Bye-bye.